We have seen a lot of failures on this channel. We've seen minor issues that are easy to miss. We've also seen major issues that cause catastrophic failure, but we haven't seen a scenario like this. And this is a Mazda 1.8 liter BP out of a 97 Miata. And Mazda came out with this engine for the 1990 Protege LX, and they carried this engine all the way through the 2005 model year Miatas. They were also in Escort GTs, the Tracer LTS, and the Kia Sophia in the mid-90s. And these are some of my favorite Mazda engines. My dad is a retired Mazda Master Tech. I remember being in these cars when they were brand new, driving them, and I've worked on them for the last 15 to 20 years. These are great engines. However, this is not a great engine. This thing it's trash. It's trash. I know all of the details on this engine except for what the inside looks like, which is what we're going to find out. Now, some of you Miata guys may have already pointed to your screen trying to correct me, saying that is not out of a 97. Well, you're wrong. This is out of a 97. This is out of a 97 and a Miata that I bought at Copart. It was a pedal car, and you guys have heard me talk about how great pedal cars are. They're just great. And this was actually a car featured in one of my other videos. If you check out my Miata Rust video, I think I did that about a year ago. That was the red NA. In that video, you'll see some of the experimental modifications done to that car, and the engine is no different. Now, this car did run and drive. It had 239,000 miles on it, which is not really that far of a stretch for a BP, but this one is tired. It barely ran. It smoked worse than cars with a blown turbo, and it was naturally aspirated. And it didn't even have enough power to do a one-tire fire with the steering wheel at full lock, clutch kicking it. It was a little down on power. So I'm not going to be surprised to see all kinds of damage on the inside. I know it's not probably a catastrophic failure because it did run, but I'm not sure what we're going to find. But again, I know you guys are saying that is not out of a 97. Well, the head isn't. It's got a VVT head from an 01 to 05 on it. None of this stuff is plugged in. I don't know why you'd go through all this work on a 230-something thousand mile engine that smoked. I mean, I don't think the head was going to fix anything at all. I think it was just a throw parts at it and see what happens. Maybe. This car had a ton of aftermarket parts on them. Maybe not good parts on them, but they were aftermarket parts. It's got an aftermarket fuel rail, some sweet JDM speed plug wires, and again, being a variable valve timing head, it doesn't have a place to mount a coil because of the oil feed here. So the coil was just kind of bouncing around on top of the engine. You know, that's good for it. And they use different cam sensors. That wasn't plugged in. That wasn't plugged in. The factory 97 Miata ECU will not run variable valve timing. They were never designed to. It's got a sending unit tapped into the coolant elbow here. It's special. First things first, let's pull the plug wires and get the plugs out and see what they look like. Oh, that's nice. Oh, that's really nice. Yeah. Come out of there. So they're a little wet. Well, we need to get the water out of the plug wells, and I could do this the clean way, or I'm just going to do it this way. Oh, that smells great. Yeah, that's wonderful. Ah, it smells great. Good as new. I'm pretty sure. Well, that was excessive. Why? Why do you need that much torque on these? I'm gonna break my ratchet. Well, I am actually impressed that these are not some E3 or split fire spark plugs that there's a 3 a.m. infomercial on, and these are actually NGK plugs. Those are the plugs that are supposed to be in this engine. However, they are not the right heat range. These are BKR 5E11s, and it's supposed to have 6s. The 11 just stands for the fact that these are pre-gapped. You don't need to gap them. And the plugs themselves don't look particularly good. 2 of the plugs look all right. They have a light tan, maybe a dark tan hue, and number 3 looks dark, let's put it that way. Same with number 1. So that would be on par with burning oil. I'm not surprised to see plugs that look like this. the next thing we're going to do is pull the intake manifold. That one was loose. Oh, that one's gone already. Someone already did some work for me. The reason they put so many bolts on this intake manifold is so you can forget a few, and nothing happens. Oh, now we're loose. Oh, got a vacuum line on the fuel pressure regulator, and the intake is off. Oh, it has a Radium Engineering fuel rail. That's something I can probably sell. So that's good. The intake ports all look pretty normal. Tops of the valves are a little wet, except for that cylinder. I don't see anything alarming yet. Now we're going to start taking the valve cover off. We're going to actually take the VVT solenoid off and take all of the VVT parts off first, and then we'll pull the valve cover. It's fine. These bolts are fine. I don't think this was supposed to be in there. Okay, all the bolts are out. Oh yes, RTV. Crappy RTV, not even the good stuff. I don't see anything terrible yet. Okay, let's see what this looks like. Get you all out. Now it should come off. Yeah, it looks pretty bad in there. It's pretty dingy. Usually these things look a lot nicer than this. A lot nicer. This one is pretty gross. Now let's continue peeling some parts off the front of this engine and see what the timing belt looks like. It looks pretty good, actually. Belt looks really good. Let's get the water pump pulley off so we can get the other timing covers off. Okay, now we're going to get the crank pulley off, and this actually just unbolts. There's just a few 10s. I really like this design. There we go. That only took a minute. This is the trigger wheel here. That looks like it's all one piece. This is really rusty here. Let's go ahead and get this main crank bolt out. Now we can get the rest of this woo well. That timing cover, this engine's likely been hot and soaking in oil. That's why these rub on pulleys and get destroyed. All right. Whoever put this VVT head on put a new belt on, a Conti-Tech. It's a pretty good belt. I don't think they replaced the water pump, or if they did, it's pretty dirty. I think it looks like it needs a crank seal. This is all pretty wet in this area. It's pretty dry up top, which tells me it's not a cam seal issue. It's likely a crank seal. Pretty common. Let's go ahead and peel this belt off. Go ahead and get the cast out of the way. That one's been replaced. It's an aftermarket piece. I've sold so many of these over the years, probably 200 or 300 of these. Now it's time to crack the cam caps loose. Finally. Well, we have some ominous signs here. The dark spots on the top of those buckets appear to be metal. It's a little grainy feeling. The journals look okay until you get closer towards the cam gear, and these are a little scored up, few scratches. But there's definitely signs of metal in here. These look pretty bad back here. The cams are also pretty scored up. I've definitely seen a lot worse. There's actually some chunks of metal still on that. Look at that. There's some, I bet that's bearing material. Yep. Oh boy. There's the cam caps. This is what usually wears first. That's the softest, and that's where all the force is from the valve springs. They're pretty rough. I'd like to take a moment to talk about this water neck. Now, I buy a lot of Miatas. I buy Miatas every month, every week if I could. And when they're hitting the front, this breaks first. It actually breaks off at the flange here on the head. But unfortunately, in order to replace this, you have to peel the timing belt off because of this black cover. We're going to take this black cover off, and I'll show you the 2-bolt flange where they break. And that's where it breaks. It always breaks right at this flange. Requires you to peel the whole front of the engine apart to fix. But I keep these around for that reason, because I buy so many Miatas, I keep these. I hardly ever sell them. They just stay here on the shelf until I get a car that needs one. Now it's time to turn this engine on its side so I can crack those head bolts loose. It's drained, right? It's drained. It's drained. It's drained. It's drained. It's drained. It's drained. It's actually drained. Well, some of those weren't tight enough. Well, they're factory bolts. All right, this will come off nice and easy. Head gasket this is. That's not a factory one. That was made in 2017. Looks like it's in good shape. It's an MLS gasket, not a factory gasket. I prefer factory gaskets on these engines unless they're boosted. The pistons are all suspiciously clean. They're usually not this nice. The cylinder walls look okay, but I can see a lot of vertical scratches further down in the bore. So I'd like to see what that looks like once these pistons are out. Let's turn this engine over. Uh-oh. Where's that sound coming from? Come in? Aha! I think we found a problem. Something's going on with that cylinder. I can feel it. But you can hear it as it gets down in the bottom of the bore on the downstroke. Yeah. That's nice. It gets really bad at the bottom of the bore. Not so bad up top. While I don't see any damage on the head, I have noticed that the bottom of the head is not properly resurfaced. It's actually like scuffed up. It wasn't done with a machine. I can tell you that. And cylinder 3, that's the wet one. We saw the plug. There's definitely going to be some issues there. And there's some buildup here on this. There's actually nothing wrong with that valve. At least it doesn't look like it. It might look like it in the camera, but it looks good in person. Let's knock this water pump off real quick. Yeah, looks all right. Aftermarket pump. All right, now it's time we flip this all the way over so we can start pulling the pan. This will really tell me if it's drained. Seen worse. It's not really coolant coming out of it though. At least that doesn't look like coolant to me. All right, let's zip this pan off and see what we can find. What the heck is going on here? Part of the windage tray. That's not how it's supposed to be. What is happening? Oh, the windage tray is glued to the pan. That's what's happening. We'll get this fixed. There we are. Oh boy. Ooh, sparkly. Ignore this that I bent up. It's fine. Just don't look there. We have chunks of metal. All shapes and sizes. Something for everybody. And another chunk of metal. That's nice. Let's see what the inside of this pan looks like. Well, that's cool. That's a lot of metal. I don't think that's just from one bearing. I think one bearing is probably worse than the rest, but I bet we're going to find damage in every cylinder. And as you can see, metal is the theme of the inside of this oil pan. Everything's kind of coated in a dark, dingy sparkle fest. Let's get this windage tray out of the way, but first let's get the pickup tube off. The inside of that's sparkly too. And here we have the crank. Yeah, she's a little loose. That's what he said. The rest of these seem to be tight. Let's turn this over. See if we can do the wiggle test to the rest of these. Oh boy. That one's extra loose. That one's good. That one's good. 2 out of 4 ain't bad. Right? I knew this thing had a problem. All right. I guess we're going to get this all apart, knock the rods and pistons out of it, probably pull the oil pump off of it. I think that's what we should do, right? Yeah, that's what we should do. Nice and easy. I don't know if we'll be able to get those screws out, but we're going to try. Let's give it a gander. Ooh, that was scary. Well, that wasn't right. Oh, do we have another shot at this? I think we have another shot at this. Let's get another bit. That's what happens when you use a number 2 and a number 3. Now I got number 3. Yeah. Wow, that's really thin. Nope, not going to say it. Yeah, this is full of metal. It's gritty feeling. It's that metal sand. Forbidden metal sand. You can see some of the grooves in the housing. You can kind of see the dark color oil, and there's some metal sparkly bits in there. Metal's been all through this engine. One thing I'd like to mention is the size of hardware that Mazda used for the rod cap bolts. It's larger than engines 2 and 3 times this size. It's a 14 millimeter headed, it looks like a 10 millimeter stud. That's much bigger than the other engines I've torn down, except like diesels and stuff along those lines. Let's crack these loose. Well, This is going to come off. Oh man, that's full of metal. Look at that silver paste. Oh, that one's really nice. Ooh, that one looks worse. It's got a little foil hanging off the side of it. Okay, you can let go now. I think there might be something wrong with this bearing. Yeah, now we're really getting there. Well, that bearing is spun. Wow, took a little force there. There's one. That's a little wider than it's supposed to be. Ooh, pretty colors too. And these pistons are just falling right out. Okay, now number 4. Ooh, that one looks worse than the last one did. I don't think it's spun though. Oh, nope, it's not spun. It's rough. Look at that. As you can see, the bearings are pretty rough. These are totally trashed. You can see the chunks of metal on that one. That's the best set. There's cylinder 2. That's a little worse. And 3, this one was the one that was spun. You can see it distorted the actual shape of the bearing, and they're discolored from getting a little warm. And 4 somehow didn't spin, but they are not the right thickness. And the sides of the pistons are really rough for these. I've pulled a lot of these engines apart, and this is worse than most. It's pretty rough. And that was the best cylinder, and it just gets worse as you get further back. Here's the side of piston number 4. It's really scored up. These are no longer usable. I don't see any ringland damage. All this looks pretty good. That's a little scored up there. The edge of that crown. Definitely not a good set of rods and pistons. Last step of the process, getting the crank out of the block. Now the main bearings also look pretty rough. They're not quite as bad, but these are supposed to last longer. That one's really chewed up. That one is too. Yeah, these are pretty bad. Look at the amount of metal on that journal. That's cylinder 1. There's the main. There's 1. There's 2. That's the one that spun. Pretty torn up. It's honestly not as bad as I expected, but it's still not good. And then there's 4. The block looks pretty worn. It's not great. I think it would clean up with a ball hone, but if it were me, I'd probably go a little overboard. Just a little. These pistons were pretty rough, and the bores kind of show it. This is my shocked face. I'm not surprised the inside of that engine looked that way. And when we pulled that car apart, I put the air filter aside because I wanted to show you guys just how bad it looked. It was one of those cheap cone filters. I put it somewhere where I wouldn't forget, and I forgot. Yeah, I think that happens to everybody. But that filter had no filtering material left. It was just a mesh cone. Where do you think that material went? Well, I think it went through the engine, and I think that helped contribute to it using oil. And someone clearly didn't monitor oil level, and I mean, that thing burned oil like a mosquito fogger. It was really bad. And I think this goes to show you that neglect and abuse can kill anything. BPs are very stout engines. I mean, they can make great power, and then they can run forever. I've had a 260,000 mile engine here out of a 99 2000, and when you pull the valve cover off, it was sparkly clean. It was perfect. It was the original engine in that car. But this had less miles on it, which not much less, and it looked rough. It looked really rough. Again, I think it was on par for the way the rest of the car looks. If you'd like to buy Miata parts, I specialize in these cars. I usually keep 4 or 5 in stock at any time, NA and NBs. I don't really do NC stuff just yet, but I have 1.6s, 1.8s, I have torsion swaps, 5-speed swaps. Whatever you need, it's a good chance I've got it. No hard tops. Sorry, I'm always out of those. Always. If you'd like to buy parts off of this engine or any of the other engines I've torn down, feel free to send us an email. I'm going to leave that in the video description. And as always, I love all the comments, all the feedback, and even the criticism. I love it all, and I'll catch you on the next one.